Tonight, Donald Trump takes aim at Canada for the first time since the trade talks broke down. Another shot at Canada's sovereignty from the White House as sweeping new U.S. tariffs take effect. The Prime Minister vowing to retaliate.
You're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked.
What we know about why Canada walked away and the new call to release what was on the table. Canadians and their livelihoods caught in the crosshairs.
Eating the tariffs and eating that cost is not sustainable financially for us. We just can't do it.
Can businesses survive the new tariffs? And with no end in sight, you weigh in on an escalating trade war.
I think we need to stand up to the President of the United States.
The perspective from both sides of the border. We have you covered.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hennemensing.
Those punishing new U.S. tariffs are now in effect on billions of dollars worth of Canadian goods, and we're just over 2 weeks away from Canada imposing new tariffs in retaliation. Trade talks broke down between Ottawa and Washington Friday, and now Prime Minister Mark Carney is facing intense pressure to figure out the most effective strategy to respond to the U.S. and protect Canadian livelihoods caught in the crossfire of this dispute. We are reporting this story with team coverage from both sides of the border and across the country, how Canadians are feeling, how businesses are coping, and the high-stakes political fallout. But we begin tonight in Washington, where Donald Trump is digging in. As Catherine Tunney shows us, the U.S. president is taking fresh jabs at Canada and reviving old rhetoric about making it an American state.
A presidential wave kicking off an IndyCar race, part of America's 250th birthday celebrations. Donald Trump is also hitting the gas in his trade fight with Canada, slapping 50% tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Canadian goods. For the first time since trade talks collapsed, the president weighed in, writing, "Canada wants the benefits of being a state without being one." Trump's top official in the file adamant that Canada is to blame for the failed talks.
They've always had the best deal, and they still would have an even better deal, but they didn't want that.
You're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked.
Canada insists Washington's proposals were unfair.
So the president's calling them out.
Another member of Trump's cabinet targeting Canada on Fox News.
It's a country that doesn't have a military. And so to think that they're going to go to war with Donald Trump and actually win that war with the U.S., I think it's foolish on their part.
Trump is facing mounting domestic pressures, including an unpopular war in Iran and affordability frustrations with voters. Democrats were quick to condemn the latest tariff salvo, linking it to higher prices. Also against the move, Trump's former vice president turned critic.
I think the last thing we need right now, as our economy is getting back on its feet, is a trade war with Canada.
Longtime Maine Senator and Republican Susan Collins called for the tariffs to come off, a sign Republicans fighting for re-election in border states may be worried. Spectators taking in Sunday Speedway also divided, with at least one American donning Canadian gear for the event.
To raise the tariffs is just a huge mistake on all fronts.
Sorry to Canada. First and foremost, we're definitely going to feel it in our pockets. We're feeling it now.
Others in full throttle support.
It's about time we reverse the financial situation and let the world pay us back.
That division from voters and even amongst Republicans is all happening at a crucial moment for Trump. The midterms about to kick into high gear.
Another critical date to watch for. The Prime Minister is threatening those dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs to come into effect on September the 8th.
If that happens, the big question will be if the U.S. retaliates further, which the Trump administration has threatened to do. More tariffs could further shock the U.S. economy just ahead of those critical November midterms.
Catherine Tunney in Washington. Federal opposition parties are demanding answers tonight, calling on Mark Carney to reveal exactly what the U.S. offered before those trade talks collapsed on Friday. Olivia Stefanovich now with what we know about the derailed negotiations and what Canada might do next.
They had language that they wanted to restrict. Unacceptable.
Hours after trade talks broke off between Canada and the United States, the Prime Minister explains why he summoned negotiators back to Ottawa.
We were not prepared to compromise Canada's sovereignty or to undermine our key industries.
Mark Carney says the U.S. demanded last-minute changes that would have hurt Canada's auto sector, culture, limit its ability to trade with other countries, and there was an issue of basic trust.
We recognize that sometimes its signature was written in pencil.
After Canada walked away, the U.S. followed through on its threat to slap new 50% tariffs on $27 billion worth of Canadian goods. New tariffs that the Prime Minister says Canada will match dollar for dollar. Key industries now worried about further retaliation.
Our biggest concern has always been an escalatory spiral. That would not be a good thing.
It's a solemn moment for the country.
Opposition parties are now calling for the government to release the full details of the proposed deal that was on the table before talks ended.
The Canadian public deserves to see the deal for what it is and judge for themselves whether the decision was right for the pain they're about to endure.
This is a national moment. It's a moment of crisis and it's a moment of great consequence. And Canadians deserve to know what we walked away from in that deal.
Members of the Prime Minister's Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations doubt the government will release the tentative deal.
I don't think the government of Canada should negotiate in public.
But based on what they've been briefed on, they say Carney made the right call.
And this is going to be a painful episode in our economic relationship with the United States. But frankly, we're left with no other choice. And this is a defining moment for us as a country where we need to stand up for ourselves and protect the future.
In the coming days, the federal government is expected to unveil new support for businesses and outline how it will apply its retaliatory tariffs. The Prime Minister says those are set to take effect the Tuesday after Labor Day.
And Olivia, what are you hearing about what it might take to bring Canada back to the negotiating table?
Well, some members of the Prime Minister's own advisory committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations point out that the date set for Canada's counter levies could give the Trump administration time to present a counter offer. Now, it's unclear if that will materialize, but they also say that even though negotiations are no longer formally happening between Canada and the U.S., they say that the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer is still in touch with Canada's chief negotiator, Jana Charette, and the minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, Dominic LeBlanc.
Olivia Stefanovich in Ottawa tonight. Canadian business owners are bracing for the full impact of these fresh American tariffs. And as Jennifer Yoon shows us, for companies banking on U.S. growth and stability, the ground shifted yet again.
Our non-alcoholic beers shipped to the United States, as well as our beers and our canned cocktails.
After 10 years building a U.S. market, American exports make up about a fifth of this Canadian craft brewery's business. But that decade of work now hangs in the balance after Donald Trump slapped new tariffs on most of their products.
It's challenging. We have plans to produce it here and sell it down there, and we want to continue with those plans, and 50% tariffs just will not make that possible.
Billions of dollars worth of Canadian goods now facing 50% tariffs. More than 500 items ranging from electronics, dairy products, hockey gear, and some clothes. Like this blazer, this Toronto entrepreneur can no longer afford to sell in the U.S.
Eating the tariffs and eating that cost is not sustainable financially for us. We just can't do it.
Others in the textile industry facing catastrophe.
One of our members has mentioned that they're going to close completely in very short order. Another one of our members has spoken about laying off almost everybody.
Economists are worried about a trickle-down effect as hard-hit businesses slow their exports and potentially put more jobs at risk.
If we're shipping fewer goods to the U.S., we'll need fewer trucks and therefore fewer truck drivers, but less obviously are in suppliers like food manufacturers, plastic manufacturing, professional services. Think about bookkeeping and accounting services.
We think we're stubborn and resilient.
It won't be easy, but this brewery owner isn't giving up. He's promoting drinks that aren't being tariffed and considering manufacturing in the U.S., all the while asking Canadians to help.
We need to stand up to a bully, but we need to stand together and buy together and use our own purchasing power.
He says it's a wake-up call. For many businesses, survival depends on Canadians buying local. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Hamilton, Ontario.
Depending on where you live, the new U.S. tariffs will be felt differently, some provinces potentially being hit much harder than others. Based on 2025 exports, BC stands to take the biggest hit, with more than 13% of its U.S. exports targeted, mostly wood and paper products. Quebec is next, with nearly 11% of exports to the U.S. now exposed. Manufacturing accounts for a lot of that. Same goes for Ontario, where the figure is 9%. With the stakes so high, premiers appear united behind the Prime Minister and his decision to walk away from the trade talks. But as Alexander Silberman shows us, when it comes to what to do next, there's signs of division.
Team Canada is 100% united.
Manitoba's premier standing strong behind the Prime Minister and his decision to walk away from the negotiating table.
And we should fight back.
Most provinces also aligned in backing dollar-for-dollar counter tariffs and urging others to do the same.
The division that we have on what is possible inside our own provinces, inside our own country, we got to narrow that gap and get on the same page.
But amid calls for unity, signs of division are showing around the best approach to respond to U.S. tariffs.
Everything's on the table.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has long pushed for electricity, critical minerals, and energy to be used as leverage.
We have to make sure that we look at every single asset that we have.
But Alberta's premier, who has attempted U.S. diplomacy herself, has repeatedly made it clear using oil as a bargaining chip is a non-starter.
Emotionally, it feels good to retaliate. I get that.
On her radio show this weekend, Smith said while she supports Carney's decision to walk away from talks, she hopes negotiations can resume to reach a deal and avoid Canada's counter tariffs.
We shouldn't be cheering if our farmers have to pay 50% more for all the equipment that they need to produce our food.
In Quebec, appreciation trade talks drew the line at protecting the French language, but also caution.
Sometimes the retaliation measure are worse than the tariffs themselves.
But no matter the approach, there will be economic pain, according to this former finance minister.
As a country, as a society, have to be careful to try and ensure that the weight of the burden of this is borne fairly.
Quebec is one province already expressing concern that dollar-for-dollar tariffs could hurt more than a strategic, targeted approach, as Team Canada considers its next steps. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Montreal.
Across the country, lots of reaction to the Prime Minister's decision to end the trade talks. Caroline Bargout brings us some of that tonight.
At the Pacific National Exhibition, NFL fans swarm to one of America's most prized trophies. But when it comes to the U.S. trade war, they seem to be Team Canada all the way, standing behind the Prime Minister's decision to break off talks.
Well, I think it's about time that we stood up for our rights, and someone needs to stand up to Trump, so I think it's great.
I think you did it right. I think it's going to be very hard at the beginning, but you got to do it, right? You can't just bend over and take all the pressure from tariffs and everything nonstop. Eventually, you have to fight back.
An Angus Reid online survey taken this weekend suggests 76% of Canadians agree. It polled nearly 1,500 people scattered among all 343 federal ridings. The margin of error given is plus or minus 2 percentage points.
Canadians have been telling us for more than a year that they think that Canada should be taking a hard line and a tough approach in terms of the talks. Well, now you've got 3/4 of Canadians who say that the Carney government was right to walk away from trade talks.
Other recent polling suggests Canadians no longer trust the U.S.
The majority of Canadians at least have decided that deeper integration with the United States, continuing to be reliant on them, is not going to do Canada well in the long term. And so maybe we need to take some pain in the short term.
But that pain can also travel south as Canadians try to ditch America and its products.
Buy local, stop traveling to the U.S. Absolutely. I haven't traveled.
We haven't put money into our country. We haven't put money into our military. We haven't been taking care of our own people. We've been more worried about what the Americans do.
For now, most Canadians seem to back Canada's tough stance, but the complete toll of the new tariffs is still to come, further testing that resolve. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, let's get some political analysis from Rob Russo. He is The Economist's Canada correspondent and a former parliamentary bureau chief for CBC News. Rob, the Prime Minister spoke on Saturday morning about the end, at least for now, of the trade talks. What was most significant to you from that?
A couple of things, Ian. The first thing is that he could have applied retaliatory tariffs immediately. He chose not to. He's left a window open for negotiation. I think we all know that an army of public servants have been working on selecting those targets, and they've been selected long in advance. He chose not to do that. The other thing that struck me was, for the first time, I think, in very pointed language, he pointed out that there's going to be a cost to an escalating trade war. That cost is going to be borne particularly by those in the sectors that have been targeted by the Section 232 tariffs: auto, steel, aluminum, forestry products. And he said for the first time that we are going to have to support those people affected in those industry for years. He said that this support is going to have to endure beyond the term of the current U.S. administration. We're talking 2.5 years at least, Ian, if that's the case. So yes, he used pointed language to say that we're in effect in a heated trade war that's escalating, but at the same time, he pointed out that there will be casualties, real casualties in that war.
It's funny you'd mention casualties in war, because the Prime Minister was also asked whether why did his tone sound like we were at war? I thought he was going to just brush aside the question, but he actually came back and said, because we're under attack. Let's play that exchange.
Why does it feel like today Mark Carney is going to war? Trade war. The tone.
Because we're attacked. Like, you're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked. U.S. put 50%. We waited until the United States decided to actually implement these so-called 338 tariffs. That's fine. We've got the reserves, we've got the resilience, we've got the plan, we've got the focus. We will respond. We're going to focus on what we can control. We're going to build.
I think the Prime Minister's Churchillian. He studied Churchill, and I think he was trying to affect tones of Mr. Churchill at times. I also think that he knows he has an outraged and mobilized population that goes into grocery stores, picks up a lemon or an orange, takes off their glasses if they're like me, and peers at that fruit to make sure it's not coming from the United States. He knows he has to respond to people who are, or talk to people who are already responding to what's happened in the United States. So it's responsible, I think, to outline the costs, as I said in my earlier answer, of an escalating trade war. And he's beginning to do that. And at the same time, I think it's important, he's leaving room and time for negotiations.
One last question. We have about a minute. Alberta referendum coming up in mid-October. How does that complicate Carney's stance on this trade war?
Well, there are a lot of people who are signaling that they would like the Prime Minister to use energy as a weapon in this war. I think that the Prime Minister has made it clear that that's not going to happen. Albertans are going to vote in a referendum on their future in October. And I don't think even federalists would not like to see their product, main product that's exported to their biggest customer, and that's energy, be used as a weapon in this war. And that limits the Prime Minister's ability to actually deploy some of the levers that normally would be available to him. At the same time, as I said, Ian, he's got time. And something else that struck me, to go back to one of your earlier questions, Mr. Trump's response, President Trump's response, kind of a feather duster flick. So I get the sense that we may be back at the negotiating table before those retaliatory tariffs kick in.
A lot of people hope that is the case. Rob Russo, The Economist's Canada correspondent. Thank you.
My pleasure, Ian.
We have more in the escalating trade war coming up, including some of the key takeaways from my conversations with Canadians on today's edition of Cross Country Checkup.
You can't negotiate with a party that doesn't care. And the U.S. really does not seem to care whether they have a trade deal with Canada or not.
A closer look at how the decision to end negotiations is being perceived throughout this country. Next.
Canada will match Washington's new tariffs dollar for dollar in order to protect Canadian workers, farmers, families, and businesses.
The major news unfolding this weekend. The Prime Minister vowing to hit back at new U.S. tariffs came into effect after trade talks collapsed. Carney accusing the United States of asking too much and offering too little. Donald Trump says Canada wants the benefits of a U.S. state without being one. We heard from a lot of Canadians this afternoon on Cross Country Checkup, asking callers their reaction to the breakdown of trade talks and what it means to them.
Mark Carney had to walk away. The big no-brainer was hearing that they wanted us to not to deal with other countries, which is just absurd, and it shows how off the deep end the U.S. administration is. But it had to be done. I think we have to. I agree with that. Adding tariffs on our end isn't the right way to go, at least right away. Like they said, you're hurting your citizens, watch how we're going to hurt our citizens, seems kind of ridiculous. What we need to implore our big businesses to do is that have the tariffs, not to lower the price. If we're going to be bailing out big companies on little people's tax dollars, it shouldn't be benefiting the U.S. Whatsoever. It should be, you keep your prices the way they are. If they buy from somebody else, so be it.
Our next caller is in Markham, Matt Ambita. Hi, Matt.
Well, I have a unique perspective because I'm a little bit younger. I'm 24 years old, so I get to see how young people are kind of digesting this news. I also work at marketing with businesses who are always trying to make more money and grow their business. And what I see most of all through all of this economic troubles and trade talks is not the fact that Canadians really understand what's going on, but as soon as they hear that there's trade negotiation or trade war, they automatically start to be a little bit more weary and have a lot more anxiety around how they spend their money, especially with young people. When we hear trade war, we kind of start thinking about our future. Are we going to be able to get jobs if businesses can't pay payroll? Are we going to be able to afford housing? Are we going to be able to start a family? And it's not so much that our pockets are really dry and we're having a hard time. It's more so that we have so much anxiety around what's going on that we start to save our money and hold our money a little bit more closer.
And how do you feel about the way that Canada is conducting itself in these negotiations?
Well, I don't think we're dealing with the same United States of America from 10 years ago. So I think that our government is doing a great job. I understand that some people may think it's not a great call of doing retaliatory tariffs. Some people think it is. No matter what, you're not going to make everyone happy. But at the end of the day, we have to hold firm on our stance. We're not dealing with the same America that we were dealing with before, and that means that we have to make tougher calls and tougher decisions.
Moshe Landers, an economist at Concordia University. And Moshe, I want to ask you a question because it keeps coming up. Potash and oil. And are those levers that Canada can use to put pressure on the United States? You're an economist, and this question has political implications. Answer it however you'd like.
Well, I'll also mention, too, that I'm an Alberta resident and taxpayer, and so I understand the importance of the oil and gas industry within the conversation. And certainly there's a nascent separatist movement in Alberta and a small one in Saskatchewan as well that feel that they're getting a bad deal from the federal government. An earlier caller was making a reference to the idea of pipelines. I think the issue is that if you try and cut off energy supplies to the U.S., whether that's turning off the lights in the American Northeast or the Midwest, or just stop shipping oil and gas to them or potash or anything else, you're playing into the narrative then of the Trump administration that look at how crazy Canada is and look at how nasty they are to us and look at how they're impoverishing our economy and that's why we need to stand up to them. You're playing their narrative, and so we want a free trade deal. So if we want a free trade deal, we have to stick to the principles of free trade, which is we don't put tariffs on things, and we certainly don't put export taxes on things, which is something that I've heard from a few callers already suggesting that this might be a way to generate revenue or get money out of the Americans. It'll do no such thing. And so I don't really think that that's a good strategy. And I think there's a reason why the Prime Minister's pushed back against it, saying, I don't know that that's necessarily the way we want to approach the situation.
Let's go to Medicine Hat, Alberta now. Kirk Awasesco is on the line.
I'm glad for a steady hand at the helm, and grateful that there's a rise in Canadian or pan-Canadian sentiment to stay connected and look after one another and support one another. Because to some degree that's been missing. It's been very regional in a perspective and perhaps not as united as we seem to be heading towards, I guess thanks to the Donald, ironically. And I guess if we're going to share responsibility in responding to crazy tariffs from an irrational individual without a moral compass, if we're going to do it collectively, it really means that probably some regions are more affected by the tariffs and some regions will be more affected by the counter tariffs.
Let's go to Kathy Woodsia, who's here in Vancouver. Hi, Kathy.
I really think that before September 8th, it would be nice to have some transparency about the deal that was rejected. And without really knowing what was offered and why it was rejected, we can't meaningfully compare that option with the economic consequences of the current 50% tariff environment. And I also think that, while blaming Trump, he's unreliable and difficult, but blaming him and complaining, and it can feel good in the moment, but it takes away from our agency and prevents us from taking responsibility and thereby finding sustainable solutions.
But here's what I don't understand is that if the United States has put, well, they have these 50% tariffs on, and if the Prime Minister, if his description is accurate, which we have no reason to believe is not, and at the last moment the United States added kind of untenable demands, what should Canada have done in that situation?
I'm not disagreeing with Carney's decision on behalf of all Canadians. I just would have liked to have known more about the deal that was being rejected. And I think maybe other Canadians would also like to have that information. But that doesn't mean I don't agree with what decisions were made because I don't know what to compare it to.
Yep.
But I do think this could be a silver lining for us because it's going to force us to, confront our vulnerabilities and create greater self-reliance.
Neil Hawkins is in Edmonton.
Number one, I think we had the wrong person negotiating. I think Carney had given us a load of you know what since day one. He told us he knew Trump, he could handle him, and he didn't. He doesn't. He's so out of his league when he was negotiating. I mean, I think they were all out of their league when they were negotiating with the Americans. I know Trump is not a nice.
Who in the world has been successful in being able to negotiate with Trump?
Well, I think conservatives would have done a better job. I think that they're more in their league. With I think Carney's way out of his league. He's not forthcoming with anything. I mean, I listened to all his gung-ho talks, but all he is talk. He couldn't do the walk. He did the talk. You look at the Gordie Howe Bridge. He was never forthcoming with information there. We lost out there. Even with the negotiating now, he's not forthcoming with what went wrong. But I would bet that a lot of it had to do with Quebec and supply management. And Liberals will die for Quebec. So but we voted them back in. We voted Liberals back in, and stupid is as stupid does.
Alex Vincent is in Montreal. Hi, Alex.
I've stopped going to the U.S. 2 years ago. I've stopped buying as much as I can, being really, really careful about buying Canadian products and dealing with Canadian businesses as much as I can. So now what we have to do is we have a lot of agencies. Stop going to the U.S. What's hurting them? The alcohol ban. We started to buy Canadian alcohol or alcohol from other countries. That's hurting them. The not going to the U.S. is hurting them. So the snowbirds should stay home this year. That would have a massive impact on their economy, way more than counter tariffs. That would hurt us as much as it would hurt them. So why would we put our own house on fire? So that's the way that I think we can retaliate in a much more impactful way and have the government take the high road and say we're going to do the best that we can for our economy and our business. But I trust Mr. Carney and the negotiating teams.
When we come back, more reaction from Canadians and how some businesses are already looking to pivot. The honey that you otherwise would be exporting to the United States, with the 50% tariff, are you going to not export any of that for now?
Correct.
More of that conversation next. Ottawa's vowing to counter Washington's latest round of tariffs with tariffs of its own. That has many Canadians wondering whether retaliation is the right move.
You think the counter tariffs are a good idea, or what do you think?
I think we don't have a choice, right? We're kind of in a tough situation, but I think Carney's doing the right thing.
I think both of us are gonna lose this way. We should find another way to solve the problem.
You're not dealing with someone who is making traditional, rational decisions. So you kind of have to meet their energy or they're just going to bully you.
Are you worried that Trump could retaliate even more?
No. I mean, there's only so far he's going to push the bar before it's too far.
A lot of people are worried about what's ahead as Ottawa and Washington's trade dispute deepens. And that's where we'll pick up the conversation from Cross Country Checkup earlier today as callers asked questions to our guests, including Erin O'Toole, the former federal Conservative leader and a member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Trade. Let's go to Stephen Murphy, who is in Winnipeg. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Ian. Listen, is it possible that Donald Trump is trying to destroy the relationship that we have with, say, like the blue states, the Illinois, the Seattles, the New Yorks, Detroit, trying to destroy the relationship with Canadians so that we're not going across border, not spending money, not buying their products, in favor of his own political party, right?
Aaron?
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. The president has a strategy here to really try and undermine critical elements of our economy or parts of it, mainly auto and auto parts, because he has this romantic notion that, you know, in the 70s when there was hollowing out of jobs in the Rust Belt, that those people were left behind. And there is some truth to that, but that was in the 70s and 80s. The U.S. pivoted to an intangibles economy, the digital economy, and the U.S. dominates in AI, in cloud, in data, and they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to go back and undermine the sort of integrated supply chain that Canada and the U.S. have had since the 1960s, and then Mexico came in the 90s with NAFTA. And they want to dictate terms on how Canada and how Europe and other countries regulate cloud, regulate AI. And quite frankly, it's not fair. And a lot of the people that should be speaking up in corporate America are not. The good thing is some are, and you're hearing people in home building, you're hearing the American Chamber of Commerce talking about how the cost of living is going up, complexity of manufacturing is going up because of these tariffs. So I think the proof will be in the pudding in the midterm elections in November in states like Michigan, where it doesn't look like the Republicans are doing as well as they should be. So this might give us an opportunity for common sense to prevail and to descend on the American administration and perhaps look at a deal down the road. But until then, we have to stay united, come up with ways to support people affected, and diversify our trade relationships. We do have more trade deals than anyone else. We just haven't taken advantage of that because the U.S. market has been so reliable. Well, that reliability has changed, and we need to take advantage of these trade deals, and I think that's what Prime Minister Carney is trying to do as well.
The new tariffs will hit some Canadian companies hard, so we reached out to Todd Stafford. He's the president of Northern Cables in Brockville, Ontario. They have 180 employees at 3 plants and export half of their product to the United States. But he says no U.S. customer will pay this new 50% tariff. So I asked Stafford what the company is planning to do next.
There's going to be a lot of discussions going here. Nothing urgent. I mean, we are going to try and, obviously ramp up our Canadian production and Canadian products. There's a few hiccups in that, but that'll be our biggest thing, try and keep things going. We haven't laid anybody off in 26 years, so it's really not a lever we pull without a lot of thought. So, but obviously if this drags on for weeks or months, we probably would have to lose some people.
And do you see the potential in Canada to increase enough business to offset at least some of your lost sales to the U.S.?
Well, it's entirely possible. I mean, we're not that big of a manufacturer. The North American market was one big market. So U.S. manufacturers sold cable in the U.S. and Canada, and Canadian manufacturers sold cables back and forth. We both bought from material suppliers on each side of the border. So having the fence go up so we can't ship south is definitely a bit of a burden. I wasn't really in favor of retaliation, but if the government was to retaliate on the same tariff codes, we would probably make up most of what we lost because the U.S. manufacturers wouldn't be able to ship into Canada. And then the other issue for us, we've been fighting for a couple of years now, is just a massive increase in Chinese products coming into Canada. So we've been hoping our government would do something about that, and that would more than make up for any of the business we would lose through these tariffs.
Okay, so let's break that down into a couple of follow-up questions. So the first one I find really intriguing, that here you were exporting half of your product to the United States, but at the same time in Canada, you were facing what? Competition from Americans. So if Canada put up a retaliatory tariff on those American cables coming into Canada, that might help you out.
Oh, it would in the short term. I mean, but until it would probably help the Chinese out more, which is really a concern because they don't have the cost pressures that we do. But again, we had such a perfectly free back and forth flow on the continent. You start building fences around it, and it's just very difficult.
So if you could call up the Prime Minister tonight, what would you tell him?
Well, he knows a lot more about what went on in those rooms than I do. So if a deal is really not something we can do imminently, then there's a few levers they could pull. They could try and, if they don't want to get the whole tariffs back and forth, I could see that escalating into being a very negative situation. But some of the other trade we have with other countries, I think they should look at how fair that trade is, and that would be good for all domestic manufacturers and probably would be seen positively by the U.S. administration.
And your message for your workers tonight?
Bear with us, be flexible. I mean, people are going to have to maybe do some things that they weren't normally doing, or do some jobs that, we're going to try hard to keep everybody busy as long as we can and try and ramp up. There's some products we think we can ramp up and try and, keep everybody gainfully employed. We probably have a couple of weeks. We've been through 2008. We've been through big shutdowns before, and we've worn out brooms and paintbrushes, painting machinery, and keeping things clean. But you can do that for a couple of days or a week. You can't do that for months.
Well, I don't know if you're generally a calm guy in the face of crises, but you seem fairly calm tonight after getting some terrible news on Friday night about these 50% tariffs. I certainly wish you and your company well. Todd, thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate the attention. Thank you very much, Ian. Todd
Stafford joining us from Brockville, Ontario tonight. As you were listening to those excerpts from Cross Country Checkup just a few minutes ago, you might be wondering, why was there not more conversation, more follow-up questions to some of those excerpts? Well, you can hear the whole thing. It was 2 hours long if you go to the CBC Listen app, and there's some interesting back and forth conversations. Donated clothes in Canada are now ending up in the trash. The apparent culprit, a rise in fast fashion.
The real problem is just that we need to turn off the tap, ultimately.
What needs to change to keep your donations out of the landfill? Next. A spectacular light show overnight in southern BC, but not one that fire crews were hoping to see. A storm system brought more than 7,000 lightning strikes to the province, sparking around 50 new wildfires. Officials say hot, dry, windy conditions are expected to return this week, bringing the potential for even more fires.
Whoa. You can feel the heat.
And a fast-moving wildfire in Nevada's Sierra foothills is bearing down on the city of Reno. About 42,000 people have been forced to flee their homes, while another 45,000 remain on alert, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Nevada's governor has declared a state of emergency. Officials say the fire was human-caused. Some charities say they're so overwhelmed by the amount of used clothing being donated, they're sending it to landfills instead of thrift stores. Taryn Grant looks at why.
Inundated with donations of used clothes, charity thrift stores are having to send more and more to the landfill.
Clothes really shouldn't go in the dumpster, but there's just so many clothes being generated now with fast fashion. Okay, so
at this store in suburban Halifax, this is a fraction of donations waiting to be sorted. The store manager says she used to be able to sell the excess to other charities. They would sell some to for-profit stores, like Value Village, and some might be exported to another country. But 6 months ago, the charities stopped buying because there's just too much.
In the work that I've done nationally, we've seen it coast to coast.
This used clothing expert says the same problem is hitting charity thrift stores across Canada.
Through the system that we have created, I think it's worked really well for many, many years. The real problem is just that we need to turn off the tap, ultimately.
The National Diabetes Trust collects used clothing from donation bins. Until recently, it would also buy from charity thrift stores. But it stopped doing that in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and Nova Scotia, citing changing market conditions that have affected inventory levels and processing capacity. Value Village would not do an interview, but in its annual reports, it says more and more of its stock is being donated directly at its stores, rather than being rounded up and delivered by charities. Value Village says it still accepts those donations on behalf of the charities, though, and pays the charities for them. One used clothing exporter says pressure is mounting on the international used clothing market. Under pressure also in a really thin margined, it's a low value commodity. Bethel says inflation and global unrest are driving up the cost of exporting used clothes. Plus, some countries are adding taxes to try to slow the stream. Genge says the only real solution is policy.
It's legislation, it's regulation that needs to come into play to address that.
She'd like to see more textile recycling and for manufacturers of new clothes to face the burden of disposal. Taryn Grant, CBC News, Halifax.
Coming up, a Nova Scotia teen reels in a massive bluefin tuna.
And all of a sudden, my dad yells, "There's a tuna!" He's like, "Dylan, get in the chair."
The fish and the reaction when they got to shore. Next in our moment. This is 13-year-old Daylin Jacquard from Nova Scotia, and she's in the middle of reeling in a massive bluefin tuna that later weighed in at more than 700 pounds. If verified, Daylin's tuna will shatter the previous junior world record in the female category. So tonight, her big catch makes our moment.
I reeled in a giant bluefin tuna. It weighed 711 pounds. I was in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, my dad yells, "There's a tuna!" He's like, "Dylan, get in the chair." It took a bit to hook on, but we hooked it on. And once we hooked it on, it just ran. It ran away, or swam away, I guess. Once it got tired of running away, he came swimming back, and I had to reel as quick as I could. When it got on the boat, I realized how huge it was. It's like double the size of me, wide and long. The tournament is called the Wedgewort Tuna Tournament. About 20 boats competing in it. When I got back, I had quite a bit people waiting, actually. It's just fun competing against people you know. Yeah, I feel pretty good. Knowing that I have a high chance of beating the record and that everyone knows it, it's just crazy.
You may be wondering what happens to that tuna now, and our producer Mabel says that it is going to be sold to raise money for the local tuna museum. From all of us on The National, thanks for being with us. I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing in Vancouver. You can also join me on CBC News Network weeknights at 7 Eastern. See you then.